Alright, man, this is going to be a rough one, but I'm going to give it a whirl anyways. Before Christ was alive on earth, the only people that ever saw Christ were mystery school initiates. And in Scotland, for example, the way that they would do this is they would put you in a tomb and put a rock over the lid of the tomb, or a rock in the front of the door of the tomb, and they would leave you in there for 3 days with no food or anything like that. No food or water, nothing. You're just in there for 3 days in the pitch black. And so after 3 days, they would roll the stone away from the door or take the stone off the top of the hole, and they would let you out. And during the 3 days in the hole, you would have had visions and shit, and you would have experienced Christ in his spiritual sense for yourself. The patron saint of Scotland is named Saint Columba, and Saint Columba did the same thing to his disciples. He actually locked them inside of a tomb in the dark for 3 days with no food and water until they saw Christ in a vision, because the regular Christ wasn't available, the flesh Christ. When you get initiated into the third degree of Masonry, you reenact the story of one of the master builders of King Solomon's temple being killed. And at the end of the ritual, they raise you up, they grab your hand, the Grand Master grabs your hand and picks you up out of the coffin and symbolizes you being brought back to life. After, because you're being resurrected into the light of Freemasonry. And that's the same way the early Christians did, is they would let you out of the tomb into the light. Now, what I really want to talk to you about on a level is this thing called initiation. And we know it in contemporary Christianity is like the baptism, the introduction. But initiation back in the day meant that you had experienced some of the spiritual mysteries, that you had done a sort of a spirit journey. You know what I'm saying? You had spent basically 3 days as a dead man with no food and no water and seeing what you could see as you're locked up in your hole. How many days are you supposed to just have acorn soup? Isn't it 3 days? I'm just saying. So there's a part in first I want to show you initiation, the reference to initiation real quick. And if you go to the book of John chapter 8:58, he refers to Nathaniel as the Israelite. You know what I'm saying? I think that's where it is. Let me double check. Eight. Oh, that's not it. Hold on. Oh, it's 147. If you go to John 1:47. Okay. Right here he talks to Nathaniel and he calls him an Israelite. He says, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile." And Nathanael says to him, "Whence do you know me?" And Jesus answered him, "Before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee." So in Egypt, the symbol for initiation, the same thing I talked about you putting them in the tomb for 3 days, was kind of talked about in the sense of the fig tree, like underneath the tree was a spot for initiation. Um, the same way that Buddha sits underneath the banyan tree when he attains enlightenment and he has his spiritual vision. The last chief of the Comanches, Quanah Parker, he had a vision of Christ in his peyote ceremony, and that's what the Native American church or the Shaker church, for the most part, is based on. That being said, who wrote the book of John? Well, if you talk to contemporary Christians, they will say that John the Evangelist wrote it. But if you talk to scholars, they'll say that the name of the person that wrote the book of John was not John. In the book of John, the only person that's referred to as John is John the Baptist, which is not the same person that we say when we John the Apostle or John the Evangelist. Or the way that he is referred to in this book is at the time after the death when Mary and the beloved disciple. That's how they refer to John, as the beloved disciple. Well, who is the beloved disciple? Check it out. Same book, Book of John. You go to chapter 11. What's chapter 11? Chapter 11 is what we commonly hear about as Lazarus being resurrected from the dead. So when Mary Magdalene tells him that her brother is sick, Lazarus, she refers to him like this: Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. That's 11:3, John 11:3. Behold, he whom thou lovest. Real quick, before I do that, let me just say here, but let's see here. Jesus heard that. He said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, and thereby the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Lazarus is coming out of the tomb of initiation. He is one of the students of Christ. The resurrection here is a symbolic resurrection. Lazarus has been initiated into the mysteries. He saw Christ for himself in his vision and then came out of the tomb and met Christ in person. That's why he says what he says to Nathanael, because Nathanael saw Christ already in his initiation and then met him, and that's how Nathanael knew that this is the fucking guy, because he had already seen this motherfucker. I shouldn't call him that, but he had already seen him in his spirit journey, in his 3 days that he was inside of the tomb. And check this shit out. He calls him an Israelite, okay? Back in the day in the early tribes, when you had initiations, there was 7 degrees of initiation. There's that number 7 again. And if you were a 5th degree Persian, like the Persian tribes, once you got to your 5th degree of initiation, they called you a Persian. And once you got your 5th degree of initiation in Israel, they called you an Israelite. So when he talks about the fig tree, and he calls Nathanael an Israelite, he's making a reference to his initiation and to the degree to which he has been initiated, saying, you're a 5th degree, basically saying you're a 5th degree Mason, and so you should be able to grasp what I'm telling you. And I know that you can grasp it because I already met you in your initiation through a spirit journey. Same thing is going down with Lazarus. Lazarus, who he loved. That's the only reference we get to for John the Evangelist. Real quick, we jump to the end of the chapter, and notice Mary and Lazarus are together at that part because they're brother and sister. If you go to the back of this, chapter 20, verse 2, and it's talking about Mary and Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved going to the sepulcher. The disciple whom Jesus loved. And she's with Mary again. Why? Because families kicked it together back in the day, dog. That isn't John the Evangelist. That is Lazarus. What? That is Lazarus. And what was the time period? Lazarus wrote the book of John. Lazarus was the beloved disciple. That's how we know that this guy might have had something going on in there. And you see why that Jesus is saying, hey, don't rat on me, because he's not trying to get killed for real, dog. They come to the sepulcher. He's been in there for 3 days, just like every other initiate, and he rolls away to the tomb. And guess what? Mary goes in there and says, Master Mason, Rabboni. That doesn't mean master or teacher. That means Master Mason. Even Jesus gets initiated. Think about it, stew it around, get mad about it, but it is what it is. I'll be back with more. Believe that shit.